Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon when you are watching this webinar. My name is Dave Nagel, and I'm very excited to connect and share some information with my good friends and colleagues in the Carlisle School District. This webinar series is an overview of developing what I call concise, empowering, short cycle formative assessments. Just sort of a longer term, but I'm going to pull in a lot of information and resources from things from Larry Ainsworth and James Popham and Rick Stiggins and several others to help provide some guidance as we go into our work in February so that we make those 2 days as productive as possible. As teachers coming to any professional learning, we have an element of what we're processing, but then we also want to walk out with this quality of product because the one thing you're giving up is your valuable time away from your students, away from your classroom. So I'm hoping that this webinar series just paints some of those pictures, some of the things we might have done during those 2 days that you can front load ahead of time, come up with some questions. And we talk a lot about flipping the classroom. This is doing the same thing and hoping to flip it for us. So we walk out of those 2 days with as much of a product that you can use and utilize our time as valuable as possible for everyone. Most of you have had a chance to meet me. I've had such a great experience working with all the administrators and teachers and Bryce and Dana and the rest of the team in Carlisle. My background in the classroom was at the secondary, middle, and high school level. But doing this work as a consultant, working with Larry Ainsworth, common formative assessment work for now over 16 years. I did that as a teacher, as an administrator, but then in schools all over the country, and certainly K-12 included. And I work most of the time for Corwin, but Corwin basically hires me through a company I call NZJ Learning. It just simply stands for Nicholas, Zachary, and Jacob, my three little guys. So just a little bit about me for those of you that haven't had a chance to meet me yet, and just kind of as a review. One thing I want to say is I wanted to have a sort of a commitment to interactive learning. This is obviously a recorded webinar, so we can't be interactive in the moment. But if you have a thought or a question, there's my email, there's my cell phone number. Do not hesitate to send out an email or question. It doesn't have to go through Bryce or anyone. You can send it right to me. And like I said, the purpose of these, to make them short, 8 to 10 minutes, you could watch. There are a few activities, but to make it so that way we come into those days as prepared, not just to learn, but to produce. And hopefully, there's really nothing in this first webinar, but you have a working handout that goes with it because there'll be several activities to complete, things that you could do in a group, in your PLC setting, things of that nature. So you should have that working handout ready to go. This webinar, there really is none that we will get into. For this particular webinar, by the end of this, you will be able to, our success criterion, we're going to talk a lot about that, the importance of helping our students understand what the criteria is to reach success, and then how that is formulated then into our assessment tools that we use. But be able to state the three main parts of any quality assessment, be able to know the 4 steps in building what I call a quality, concise, empowering, short cycle assessment. I will abbreviate to a simple acronym called a CISA, and then understand what you will walk away with after those days, February 1st and 2nd. So that's what I'm hoping that you're able to do. We'll revisit these by the end of this first webinar. Any quality assessment really comes down to these 3 points: purpose, evidence, inference. What's my purpose? And then when do I have enough evidence to make a quality inference? I use a real life example a lot when I'm trying to get to my locations or my schools in the morning. I have a purpose to get there on time, and if at all possible, with a large Starbucks coffee. Well, the other day I was trying to do both of those, and I drove by a Starbucks, and there were so many people in line and so many people in the drive-thru that I realized I could not get there with my purpose intact because I made an inference from the evidence I was seeing. So I just drove another 30 feet and found another one. Now, all joking aside, when we think about how we make inferences all the time in life, we have a purpose to get to our location. We look at our GPS. We have a purpose to see how dinner is cooking, and we're looking how it's coming along. We have a purpose in our classrooms to understand if our students know 2-step equations, how well they can put into place some of the aspects of the causes of the Civil War, whether or not they could identify who the truly main character was and how he was impacted by a part of the plot. And then our assessment should be designed to gather enough evidence so that we're making quality inferences to know if students are reaching that purpose. I'm going to come back to this point over and over, but it's kind of the catch-all. It brings us back sort of as a conceptual understanding that I'm hoping simplifies some of the work, but empowers us to look at not only assessments we'll create in the future, but examine or critique any existing ones we're using. Simple quote here from James Popham that I am going to read. James Popham is Professor Emeritus from the University of UCLA. His first research, he's literally the worldwide leader in assessment. His first research study spanned the years 1889, I believe, somewhere around there, to 1916. So he has forgotten more about assessment than I know I'll ever know. But it's a planned process, and where teachers elicit evidence from students to adjust their ongoing instruction, or by the students to adjust their current learning tactics. When we think about that for a second, we should be using formative assessment so we can adjust. But the reason why we'll talk about the importance of success criteria and helping students know what they need to do, they can adjust how they're learning. And one of the things John Hattie talks about is we have to make sure we're not guiding students to a game of learning. And when they go from one teacher to another, very often they have to learn how to play that game. Hopefully this will create a more shared assessment language across classrooms, and certainly within disciplines at the middle and high school level, and then at the elementary level across grade levels. So what are CSAs, or concise, empowering, short cycle assessments? Well, they're going to be focused, concise, on a couple of impact or priority power standards. And so we'll really make sure, what is the main focus of this particular assessment piece? They have to provide quality inferences into student learning, and we're going to talk about how we create quality distractors. So if we're creating multiple choice items or selective response, students might be selecting the best answer, and really there's a couple that are close, and that tells me if they take one of the other choices, what their misconception would be. They're short, 2 to 3 weeks. So it might be that this is a small piece of a larger assessment or test we're going to give. But when we come to our PLC meetings, we're only focusing on looking at this information. So maybe we have a chapter test in biology or social studies, and we're going to say, let's say for general purposes, there's 25 items. We might decide that these 10 and this one selected response or constructed response, written response, that's what we're really focusing on. So again, these might be a standalone assessment or a piece where we're going to assess more stuff, but we've got to make sure they learn this for the next unit, and some things aren't always as important. So we'll talk about how this could be a standalone short assessment or a portion of a larger one. And then finally, it must be used for teachers to make immediate and decisive instructional adjustments. So we have to be able to score it quickly, come to our PLC meeting and be able to decide what adjustments might we need to make. We're going to talk about how we can do that throughout the process. And they're aligned, pre and post. And we're going to talk about sometimes we have a mirror pre and post assessment where it's almost the exact same one. And other times it's a like pre-assessment. It's just a small piece of the larger one. They're collaboratively designed. So the PLC grade level data teams are going to create these together. And we're going to talk about building a plan to adjust or adapt our current assessments over the next couple of years, and we certainly won't do it overnight. And again, the evidence from these is what we should be using in our data teams and PLCs. And I'm guessing for some teams, this is going to be a slight adjustment. For others, this might be an eye-opener to how well our PLCs can begin and data teams start to move even more if we really look at the assessments we're using at the different focus. And there'll be 4 simple steps. You kind of see that in your handout, not an activity, but we determine what are the priority standards, or I might call them impact standards. We'll do some uncovering and unwrapping of those to identify the concepts, skills with the accurate rigor level, the accurate DOK level. Determine the assessment type based on that rigor level. Will we be using selected response or constructed response? Will it be a short constructed with just a few words where we really don't need a scoring guide, or a longer one where we absolutely will have to have a scoring guide? And then we'll need some type of rubric or scoring guide for the success criteria of the whole assessment, and then for any constructed response. If students are writing down something that there is a subjectivity to the response, we want them to be able to understand what the criteria is and also empower us to collaboratively score that as accurately as possible. Finally, what you will walk away with on February 1st and 2nd. What's my reason for investing my time? That's a question a teacher should ask. A deeper understanding of some foundational assessment practices. We're going to talk about that a lot because we have to go into everything we do with a formative mindset. And if we're not looking at our assessments as a way to give us information, not just to give the students grade or score them, we're going to miss the mark. Some specific tools that you can apply the very next day. So not only I'm hoping that you walk out with as close to a completed assessment as possible, but tools that you can use to adjust some of your classroom questioning and some of your exit ticket items and things of that nature. And hopefully something that will save you time, where we can assess more students with fewer items and get better inferences. As I mentioned, a completed common formative assessment, And that's kind of got some asterisks because some might have to come back and adjust it, but as close to a completed one as possible. And then some predetermined look-fors. We'll dig into the learning progression piece so we can say, what should we be looking for in student responses, not just on the assessment, but on some day-to-day instructional pieces, so I am making better quality adjustments. And most teachers who've gone through this process have walked away with saying, I'm realizing now sometimes students aren't as far away as I think, and I'm buying back time because I can move on, because they might not have gotten it, but they're getting it. And I'm going to hit this concept or skill in the next unit, so I don't have to be pressed for time as much as I thought I did. Again, I'm going to come back to this so often. Purpose, evidence, inference. Everything we do in assessment needs to be, what's my purpose? And then when do I have enough evidence to elicit the best inferences possible to make instructional adjustments? Again, back to our success criteria. Should, by this point in time, state the 3 main points of any quality assessment, and I hit that almost every couple of minutes throughout these webinars. The 4 steps, which you see in your handout, and hopefully now you've got an understanding of what you'll walk away with on February 1st and 2nd. As always, thank you for your time. Appreciate your ability to invest in watching these, learning about what we're going to be sharing, bringing any questions ahead of time, and then really the work that we'll put in on those 2 days. But if you have a thought or a question, do not hesitate to reach out to websites there, corwin.com and my personal gradingforimpact.com if you want any more information. And I look forward to talking to everybody very, very soon.